Hey everyone, we've all heard the classic underdog story of David and Goliath, right? The little guy facing impossible odds, but in this explainer, we're going to uncover the shocking historical reality behind it. Because when you actually look at the archaeological evidence and the history of the ancient Near East, this isn't just some simple Sunday school story. No, it transforms into an epic clash of geography, civilizations, and literally cutting-edge technology.
So, what actually happens when an ancient, high-tech superpower meets a teenage shepherd with a sling? Well, let's completely reframe what you thought you knew about this epic showdown. You see, this wasn't just a random fistfight between a big guy and a small guy. This was a massive collision between a heavily armed coastal empire and an under-equipped, brand-new mountain nation. And to really grasp the sheer magnitude of David's courage, we've got to understand exactly who the enemy was.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1. The migration sequence, and the Sea Peoples. To set the stage, right around 1200 BC, the major powers of the ancient Near East went through this mysterious and catastrophic collapse. And out of all this chaos over in the Aegean Sea region, so near modern-day Greece and Crete, a massive migration happened. Egyptian records actually called these people the Sea Peoples. They swept across the Mediterranean, bringing huge changes with them, and eventually they settled right on the southern coastal plain of Canaan.
Now, ancient records, Egyptian reliefs, and even modern DNA evidence from skeletons found in Ashkelon prove that these Philistines, they were not uncultured brutes. Not at all. They were sophisticated survivors. They brought advanced Mediterranean knowledge, naval expertise, and a highly organized society with them. In fact, they quickly set up this incredibly powerful confederation of 5 major city-states: Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Ekron, and Gath.
And get this, they were highly urbanized architects and artists. I mean, just look at this stylized Aegean-style beer strainer jug. This totally proves they weren't just warmongers. They were a highly developed civilization enjoying a prosperous, culturally rich urban life, literally right on the doorstep of the Israelites. You can even see the beautiful, stylized bird and geometric patterns that reflect their distinct Aegean lifestyle. It's fascinating stuff.
Which brings us to Section 2, Philistia's high-tech iron monopoly.
Okay, so there was a massive technological gap between the Philistines and their neighbors, like a huge one. The Philistines literally ushered in the Iron Age in this region. So while the Israelites were living up in the central mountains, still relying on softer, inferior bronze tools, the Philistines completely monopolized the new, harder metal, iron. They guarded this tech so fiercely that the historical records show the Israelites literally had to travel down to the Philistines and pay crazy high prices just to get their farming tools sharpened. Because they controlled the iron, the Philistines were basically a high-tech superpower, while the Israelite army was essentially an under-equipped militia fighting with sharpened sticks and farm equipment. Crazy, right?
Moving on to Section 3, Standoff in the Valley. So, the coastal Philistines and the mountain-dwelling Israelites finally collided right in the middle, at the Valley of Elah. The Philistines already controlled the Fertile Coast, but they were pushing eastward into the highlands, which is where the Israelites lived under King Saul. This transition zone is called the Elah. It's a series of gently rolling foothills, and for an invading army trying to reach cities like Jerusalem or Bethlehem, these valleys are literally the highway. So the Philistines marched their forces to the Elah Valley, totally hoping to draw Saul's weaker army out of the rugged hills and onto open ground where their superior weapons and tactics could easily crush them.
But instead of a massive bloodbath in the valley, the Philistines threw down a challenge of representative warfare. Basically, they demanded a single man come down and fight their ultimate weapon. This was actually a known tactic back then. Think of it kind of like a 1v1 tiebreaker in a video game. Rather than risking thousands of lives, each side just put forward their absolute best warrior. Winner takes all, and the loser's entire nation becomes subjects of the winner. And for the Philistines? Their champion was a guy who embodied all of their technological and physical superiority.
And that leads us right into Section 4, Stones over Swords. So for 40 days straight, these two armies are locked in a tense staring contest across the valley, while this Philistine champion steps forward every single day to taunt the terrified Israelites. And guys, Goliath wasn't just a tall dude, he was essentially an ancient Terminator. He was covered in impenetrable armor and holding high-tech weaponry that the Israelites couldn't even dream of. The text tells us he was over 9 feet tall. He wore a coat of scale armor weighing 125 pounds. His legs were protected by bronze greaves, he carried a javelin, and his primary weapon was this massive spear with an iron point that weighed over 15 pounds on its own. He was literally a walking fortress of Aegean military tech.
No one in Israel, not even King Saul, dared to face him. That is, until a young shepherd showed up at the camp just to drop off some food for his older brothers. Against this walking tank steps an unarmed teenage boy who fundamentally understood that true substance and ultimate victory come from trusting God over any advanced human technology. David didn't have armor. He didn't have an iron sword. King Saul even tried to put his own royal armor on David, but David took it off. He literally couldn't even walk in it. Instead, he just took his shepherd's staff, 5 smooth stones from the valley stream, and his sling. And when Goliath mocked him, David didn't even flinch. He declared with absolute, unwavering certainty that the battle belonged to the Lord. Using a sling, which by the way was a lethal, high-speed, long-range weapon that kept him way out of Goliath's deadly reach, David landed a perfectly placed strike, dropping the giant face down. This is such a brilliant tactical move that totally gets overlooked. Goliath was equipped for close and medium-range combat, right? But a skilled slinger could hurl a stone at incredible speeds, often carrying the stopping power of a modern handgun, and strike perfectly from a distance. David found the one vulnerable spot in Goliath's armor, his forehead, and struck with deadly precision. Just like that, the technology of the giant was instantly neutralized.
Then, using the enemy's own high-tech iron sword against him, David decisively ended the duel and completely shattered the Philistine illusion of invincibility. It was a stunning, lightning-fast reversal. The exact weapon that was supposed to subjugate Israel was used to finalize their deliverance. The boy had defeated the giant, and the entire tide of history shifted in a single instant.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, the surprising aftermath.
So what actually happens after the unbeatable high-tech champion falls to an under-equipped shepherd boy? Well, the terrified Philistine army completely panicked and fled the valley. Israel gained massive momentum from this, eventually building monumental fortresses right on that very border. In fact, excavations at Kirbet Kiapha, a massive, heavily fortified city overlooking the exact valley where David fought Goliath, prove that in the aftermath of these conflicts, Israel rapidly developed into a powerful, centralized kingdom, capable of defending its borders against the Philistine threat.
As for David, he was instantly catapulted to national fame. Sure, it sparked a pretty jealous rivalry with King Saul, but it ultimately positioned David to become the king of a united, powerful Israel. The women of Israel literally sang his praises in the streets. This event was the absolute catalyst. It took Israel from a loose, fearful collection of tribes hiding out in the hills to a dominant regional power, and it took David from a forgotten shepherd boy to the legendary king of Israel.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to remember the real takeaway here. No matter how advanced or intimidating the giants in your life might seem, the ultimate victory belongs to God. David looked at a high-tech, heavily armored giant, and he didn't see an impossible obstacle. He saw an opportunity for God to show up. For all of you watching, you might be facing situations right now that seem as overwhelming as an iron spear against a wooden stick. But David's story is the ultimate reminder that when you step onto the battlefield in the name of the Lord, you already have the victory. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into history today. Keep learning, keep trusting, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.